All right, it's time to welcome in Joey Wagner. Let's talk about the Illinois side of things with our weekly six-pack of Illini questions leading into the Rutgers game, game 11 for Illinois on the schedule. They're back in the rankings, number 25 in the college football playoff rankings, number 24, I believe, in the AP top 25. They're 7-3, Joey. That is the fifth most wins for a Big Ten team right now. We'll dive into that with our six-pack. We'll talk about bowl possibilities. We'll talk about this matchup. But how are you, man? Good to see you. Are you ready for the trip to New Jersey?
I am. Just to get some like a Soprano tour we can take, learn a little bit about Sopranos. I've never been to Rutgers. I understand it's very loud with their speakers. You've mentioned that a time or two.
Yeah, like when you go to a noon kickoff there, you better be ready for a party in the morning because that sound system is the most intense in the Big Ten.
I don't know if I want to be ready for a party in the morning. That's still a little early for my taste. I'm excited to get out there. What are we naming this final stretch? Like the drive for Florida on the way to Orlando?
Yes. This is trying to solidify a trip to Orlando. I know some Illini fans would love it to be Nashville. We'll get to these bowl possibilities. Win one more game. I think you're going to one of those destinations, whether it's Orlando or Nashville. But I think – you can, especially with this game, Joey. Like this is the path to Orlando. First goes through Piscataway.
Chasing Cheez-Its? Is that what it is? It's a Cheez-It Citrus Bowl? That's what I'm calling it.
Yeah.
You're right, man. I mean, 2-0 probably gets them there. But then again, you're watching, and Indiana's got a pretty heavy say in this. And by Indiana, I mean probably the bowl committee. They're the playoff committee in determining where they go. Because if they don't get in the playoffs, Illinois can win out, and Indiana would still probably be the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl draw. So it's really fascinating, right? It feels like it's dwindled down to a number of, it's Orlando, Tampa, or Nashville, which seem to be the three that makes sense to me. And Indiana I feel like they've got the loudest voice in this thing in terms of where they go, where Illinois goes, rather.
Yeah, well, let's get into this because Nebraska, they have won two straight games. They won 4 to start the season, and then they lost 4 straight, but they've bounced back with 2 straight wins. But before we dive into the Rutgers matchup, Joey, let's start off with question number 1, which is after that win against Michigan State, which was pretty dominating win, 38-16. What was the most encouraging thing from that win over Michigan State, in your opinion?
The passing attack looked like the passing attack that we saw Illinois have in the first half of the season. At this point, it feels like we're just kind of banging the same drum about the 2 games that Luke Altmaier really, and this passing attack didn't really look like itself, but you've seen the importance when this passing attack is hitting on the cylinders that we've seen it hit on, what it can do for Illinois. And I think just being able to get deep plays to Pat Bryant, to Zachary Franklin. Zachary, I guess, was more of a broken tackle and getting there. Luke Altmaier looking comfortable. The first pass, you put it in danger, first or second, you thought, oh, well, that's not ideal. But then there's never really a moment, again, where you were concerned about that. So I just think getting that to back to its level cleans up a lot of mistakes. That's like the 2022 Chase Brown, right? Chase Brown cleaned up a lot of warts on that 2022 offense, and this passing attack can clean up some similar warts within the offense. So that has to be it for me.
Yeah, because it's your competitive advantage, right? I mean, the rest of Illinois, you could look at parts of the pass rush, maybe Gabe Akis, like there are other, that might be the other special thing, maybe special teams. But the passing attack is what makes Illinois a good football team. Instead of a mediocre one or even maybe a below average Big Ten team. It's that Luke Altmaier, Zachary Franklin, and Pat Bryant. It is hard for teams to corral that. So I agree with you. Like it is Altmaier bouncing back. It is that passing attack looking like it's full self. But the other thing I would mention is that Illinois and Aaron Henry found a way to succeed with their personnel because the personnel on defense is flawed. But despite having Dylan Rosiak out, I thought your linebackers played pretty well against Michigan State. And then you find a way to improve your pass rush with that third down package that we have talked so much about, but you're finding a way to put your personnel in positions to succeed when sometimes we have questioned that this year with the Purdue game, with the Oregon game, or, even the Minnesota game at times. But like, it felt like you found a way with a backup safety, a Matt Krasevich in there That guy made some huge tackles in the game. James Kreutz, Malachi Hood, Ryan Mead played pretty well. And then you get Kenenna Odeluga, JoJo Hayden, General Hunt on that third down package. I thought that was one of Aaron Henry's better games just because he pushed the right buttons most of the time. I know the goal line, dropping 8 in the coverage didn't work out, but I thought he was more aggressive. And I just thought his guys looked fresher. His guys looked better. And part of that's Michigan State's not that great. But I also thought, Aaron Henry kept them not great because he put his guys in positions to succeed.
Yeah, the third down defense was my second, if not the passing attack. Real quick with the passing, like it feels like people who cover it intimately, like we do every week, you're in and out of everything. You could overthink it with exactly like you said, Gabe Backus having a Gabe Backus or whatever else you want to look at. But if you zoom out, it's clearly that's easily the offensive answer. The third down, beyond like Gabe Backus was dominant. He got credited for a sack and a half. Was that what it was? He's responsible for the rest of them too. I mean, he was just
PFF originally had him for 7 pressures. They went back and up that to 10. That sounded more likely because after I watched that film, Joe, I go, this was Johnny Newton level
stuff, dude. Yeah,
he absolutely took over that game. And by the end of it, as good as Pat Bryant was, as good as Luke Altmaier was, Zachary Franklin, I thought the best player in the field was Gabe Backus in that game.
Yeah, which is great for Illinois for the next 2 games. Then you gotta hopefully another one. Yeah, then you gotta hope you get 12 more of those from the guy. But that third down, I kind of, are we talking about it too much? I don't think so, but sometimes I wonder that because it was the most creativity we've seen with Aaron Henry at defensive coordinator, and that felt like a moment where you've had this defense and it worked so good at one point, and you modify this and you modify that, and last season's not as good, and this season's really up and down. Then you have this moment where it's like this group of guys who don't really fit perfectly in one spot. It's a fast, it's a long, it's a tall, especially in the secondary operation. It's like, man, otherwise, where do you find a use right now at this point of the season for a Malachi Hood when things are established, for a Tyson Rooks, the General Hunt? Like, that creativity to me told me a lot about what – like we've been very critical at times of this defense this year. But it's a reminder, like there's a lot of smart football happening in those defensive meeting rooms to find a way to use those guys. We'll see if they do it again. But that to me is like I thought like it might be my like top 3 favorite stories about the season, honestly, because it's so cool. The personnel, the background, the stories, the pivot to the trust to do it. Obviously, there are really great stories, right? You can go up and down with Pat Bryant and Luke Altmaier and Gabe Backus and down the line. But I don't know what it is about that particular sub-package that I am just enamored with.
Well, number one, Aaron Henry needs to find a better name. Dime just doesn't cut it. It's not cool enough.
I'm thinking Turbo could really get some speed here.
You really like it's Turbo time.
But 3 people who watch I Think You Should Leave will get a kick out of that.
The other thing is, though, like, it's not just that those guys make the plays. It's that Kenenna Odeluga rushing the passer from, like, that 3 technique got Gabe Backus good opportunities. Like, having him on those stunts and having Kenenna Odeluga with the speed rush, disrupting the backfield and getting that first part of the stunt, it allowed Gabe Backus to stunt, get inside, and make some of those pressures. And then it kept some of the other guys fresher. It kept Seth Coleman fresher. It kept Gabe a little bit fresher. So I think it just kind of, there was a trickle effect to all of that stuff too.
How much do you think we'll see that moving forward? Because it worked with the speed of Aiden Childs. Like that felt like the driving force behind doing that. But I think there's enough overlap that you can do it without an athlete like Aiden Childs back there.
It should be even more effective against a non-athlete because it is easier to catch Calic Manis isn't a bad athlete, but like it's easier to catch him than it is Aiden Childs. So as long as it's 3rd and 5+, yeah, I'm rolling with that group. 3rd and 4, no, you probably want Alec Bryant in the game. Probably want Seth Coleman, Gabe Backus, and Dennis Briggs and all those guys because they can still run the ball. But when it's obvious passing situations, absolutely. I want those guys on the field. The other part I would just say is just you didn't win because the other team made mistakes. Like Illinois just went and won that game. Like they just, in every phase, they were better, which they should be. Again, against a Michigan State team that's not all that good, but they dominated. And it wasn't, there were some issues there in the 3rd quarter, but they found a way to really play complementary football there. All right, number 2, Joey. Which player's growing role has intrigued you the most late in the season? Because we are seeing, as we're talking about the sub packages, some guys that need to step up because of injuries. We're seeing more of these younger players, these second stringers, step into more meaningful roles.
Yeah, I want you to go first. So I've got 2, and I want to see where you. I'm assuming we've got a pretty good overlap here.
Yeah, and I think you're writing about him, or you just did. Jaheim Clark is one that interests me because how many reps did he play last game?
He's had 30 or more since Oregon. Now, Oregon, before you go on, like Oregon, there were injuries. He had to play. Like there were just no other corners available. Injuries hit Xavier Scott in particular against Minnesota. Injuries didn't put Jaheim Clark on the field against Michigan State. He did. His play got him out there, and that is what jumped out to me. But go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's Jaheim Clark. One, I liked him as a prospect just because he was long, he's fast, he's tenacious. He just kind of screamed everything Aaron Henry loves about defensive backs. And we saw that last year on special teams. We saw that early on special teams. But I think we are seeing it on the field. Daniel Jackson got the best of him against Minnesota, but that's growing pains. He learns from it. I thought he played really well against Michigan State. And the most interesting thing, he's the third corner right now. He is playing like starters reps along with Torrey Cox, along with Caleb Patterson. He has passed up Terrence Brooks, who was healthy last week. So for me, that's a really encouraging sign for Jaheim Clark that he has taken that step forward because he's going to play a huge role the rest of the season. He's going to play a role next year with Patterson and Cox back. And listen, whatever happens with Terrence Brooks, or if he decides to go elsewhere after the season that didn't work out the way he wanted to, you feel like Jaheim Clark playing right now is playing at a decent level, a quality level that your cornerback room could be really good next year. And then once Patterson and Cox are gone for the 2026 season, Jaheim Clark could be the senior who's an important part of that team. So I think he played like 50 snaps last game, 40 something snaps last game. Like that's intriguing because it wasn't noticeable. Like it wasn't noticeable that he was out on the field getting picked on. So his development is really encouraging for me.
Yeah, there's some real optimism in the building for how that defensive secondary can look next season, which still feels a little weird to say given how bad it was a season ago. As Corey Parker has gone in there and worked freaking wonders with that. That was a group that didn't have a lot of Division I experience. I guess Torrey Cox did, so we should say Power 4 experience. It's a team or position group that was rife with defensive pass interferences, with penalties. Those have been cut down. Like, I don't know. I don't know if we're talking enough about Corey Parker and the impact he's had on that room and his ability to keep a guy like Jaheim Clark ready when there's not been a lot of snaps to go around for him those first few games. You talk about, you can go down the line, guys like Amar Reynolds, who's a freshman who sounds like has really bulked up and helped. Like Corey Parker wants 4 or 5 defensive backs at any point in time ready to go. Go look at his Toledo teams. They've had that. And you're starting to see that come to fruition.
To your point, Joey, the penalties for the corners are really impressive. Caleb Patterson has played 466 snaps. He has 2 penalties. He had 1 penalty in 13 snaps last year, right? Torrey Cox, 2 penalties in 294 snaps so far this season. Matthew Bailey, 1. Terrence Brooks, 1. Tyler Strain, 1. Miles Scott, 1. Like Xavier Scott in all the snaps he's played has only had 1. So whether it's the boxing gloves they practice with or whatever, this is a much more disciplined group. And I wouldn't say it's a big time playmaking group on the ball. Like they need to make more plays on the ball. And I think that can come with a little bit more experience, kind of like Miles and Xavier. The more they play, the more they trust themselves to pull that trigger. But they're good tacklers, they're sound, and they're disciplined. They just haven't given up a ton of big plays, and they seem to mitigate those things. So it's not a cornerback group that I think is like studly right now, but it's solid. It's a solid group. And the fact that Terrence Brooks isn't a big part of that, I think, one, it says a lot about Corey Parker. They said, hey, Terrence, you're not walking into the starting job. And I think that's important for the group long term, that they know that whoever you are, you have to play up to their standard and be reliable for your team. And these other guys have showed up and played well enough.
Yeah, 100%. It's just not a problem right now. And you can see the foundation of this group and the long-term potential that this group has just in what they've done this year. So I'm with you. Jaheim Clark, the Michigan State game really is what opened my eyes. Like, all right, he's just flat out earned this. Like this, they're healthy and he's out there. I'm stuck somewhere between, I'm going to say Kaneno DeLuga. Maybe I'll be a prisoner of the moment. James Krutz, I think, is also a pretty fine answer in that spot. Or you could look at even a Hank Beatty as somebody who's a fine answer in that spot. Kaneno DeLuga, at his best, before that ankle injury, you knew who he was. I thought there was probably a little bit before the season, a little bit more like your traditional middle-of-the-field linebacker capabilities that we didn't see. I think it's pretty clear now. Maybe I misread that, and I think it's clear now. Let him go get the quarterback. He is really, really good at creating pressure. And the fact that he lined up on a defensive lineman in that third down package, or there's just ways you can utilize him. I know it's a long recovery back from that ankle injury he had at Iowa last season, but getting him back in this final push as you go in to that bowl game, I think that's something to really build on. And it's got to be important for Kaneno DeLuga to get out there and feel football again and be able to get after the quarterback in a meaningful way. And the snaps that we've seen him do that these last two games, aided, yes, by Dylan Rosiak's injury, he has gotten out of the quarterback at a pretty good level.
Yep.
Like it's not like it's just been one or two plays. He's consistently, making his presence known. So I'm just really interested in how they go about using him. And it goes back to that, not even just on the defensive line, but our conversations with Aaron Henry to finding out the best way to use these guys. There's a lot of different ways to use Kaneno DeLuga and let him get back there. And I'm eager in these next 2-3 really to see how they're able to do that creatively and get him on the field because he deserves to be on the football field.
Malachi Hood is really intriguing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The athleticism and size he brings at linebacker, and he played a lot of snaps last game. It wasn't just the dime package. He played 28 snaps in that game. I thought he looked pretty good. General Hunt getting in, the fact that he can redshirt and come back, I think that's important for a team that's probably going to have to go get at least 2 transfer defensive linemen. If he can be a rotational piece along with Jeremiah Warren at that nose tackle position, that could be important for them next year. And I know you caught up with this guy who's really impressive, and he could play more this week with Malik Elzy potentially not going to play again. Brett Bielema was talking with you guys about the injury. Feels like he still could be held out this week. But Alex Kapka-Jones coming in and making that big third down catch. We've heard all offseason about how they have been encouraged by him and that he could make some big plays. It's just Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin are so good. It's hard to take them off the field. But talk about next year, Joey. Like, they lose those 2 guys. And, well, I don't know if you're going to go all in on Alex Kapka-Jones being the starter or you don't go get somebody in the transfer portal. He's going to play next year. So to see him maybe contribute here is an encouraging sign for next year.
Yeah, I would encourage, if you've not watched the interview with him yesterday, to please go and do so because it's football. You're talking about football, but he's also talking about real life. And he thought he'd have a bigger role. He got some pretty significant buzz in training camp, and he thought he was going to come out and have a good spring game. Exactly. He thought he was going to come out and have a bigger role. And then as this goes, it becomes more and more clear, like, wait a minute, why would you take Pat Bryant or Zachary Franklin off the field? They don't get tired. They're playing at a really high level. They're both going to be in NFL camps in 5-6 months. You don't take them off the field, right? So, I understand it, but for him, and it's a credit to Justin Stepp, Brett Bielema talked about this with the wide receiver and running back rooms today, to keep Alex Kapka-Jones engaged, to keep Alex Kapka-Jones ready to go catch a ball at 14 yards and get upfield for a critical 1 yard on 3rd and long that, frankly, probably should have been not a first down. Just 5-yard penalties on offense don't tend to always go very well. So he's really fascinating. And his length, someone before the season, you're trying to get a feel for how good he'd be. And someone said, hey, you could have a Jonah Morris, Iowa moment. That big catch down the sideline. I think he got hurt, in fact, on that catch Jonah Morris did. It was kind of similar with Alex Kapka-Jones down the sideline against Michigan State. Maybe not as significant given the way the 2 games ended, but it was a really big spot for him. And he's intriguing, especially if Malik Elzy is unable to go at Rutgers. Could he have another opportunity there? And good for Luke Altmaier for letting it rip to a guy who that was his first catch all season, didn't have a catch going into that moment. He's interesting. I also want to add JoJo Hayden. Seen him get more and more at the edge position. A lot of these, Jeremy, unsurprisingly, I guess, on the defensive side of the ball, as they try to
Akrasetic can be thrown in there.
Akrasetic is in there, and offense is just there's not a lot of airspace for some newer guys to come up because of your Pat Bryant's, Luke Altmaier's, Zachary Franklin, Tanner Arkin, Josh McCray. But defense has been a little bit more wiggle room for guys to come up and make those impact. And JoJo Hayden's been an interesting guy back at that edge where he probably should have been the entire time, given what we had seen from him in high school.
Yeah, the guy I'm interested to see finish up the last 2 games is Brandon Henderson on that offensive line. See how he ends the year going into next season as well. All right, number 3, Joey. How do you evaluate Aaron Henry's second season as defensive coordinator? I feel like this is a topic we need to hit on because I think we got to zoom out because there certainly have been moments that have been worthy of being critical of Aaron Henry, and that Purdue game was the biggest one for me. But as you zoom out, I think you can only look at this season as progress. Whether you, the listener, is sold on Aaron Henry long term, I think he is really bright. I think he really connects with his players. I think he is even admitted, Brett Bielema has admitted, like he is learning on the job here. But I feel like this has been huge progress. So I broke down the numbers from last year to this year. So let's go down these stats. Scoring defense. Last year, Joey, 29.4 points per game. That was 96th in the country. This year, 20.6 points per game. That is 32nd in the country. That stat alone, huge progress, right? And that's the stat that matters the most. But pass efficiency defense, they went from 69th in the country last year to 56th. Sacks, they went from 76th at 2 per game to 26th in the country at 2.7 per game. Rush defense, pretty similar, 65th last year, 67 this year. To be honest with you, I thought the rush defense would be a little bit worse than it has been this season. Third down, went from 110th in the country last year. That's one of the worst in the country, obviously. Still not great, but they're at 88th in the country at 41.5%. Last year was 44%. Big plays, they were good both years. Only allowed 4 plays of 20-plus yards per game last year, 3.6 this year. Defensive efficiency from ESPN last year, 80th. This year, 69th. Nice. And takeaways, which has not been good lately. Last year, 100th. This year, 55th. So in almost every category, it has been progress, right? And I still think they need to get more talent. I think that is important. But I feel like this has been a competent defense for the most part this season. But there have been moments that have certainly been worth plenty of criticism.
Yeah, competent feels like it was the word that came to mind. Because as you meant, this is not last year's defense. Last year's defense was a disaster. And I guess relative to Brett Bielema tenure, a disaster. This has not been that. And there's, I don't know. Like you can see it. You can see what Brett Bielema at times, you can see at times what Brett Bielema sees in Aaron Henry as a defensive coordinator. I have no doubt Aaron Henry can go up and command a room. I have no doubt that he can find a way to maximize guys who you maybe didn't see a clear-cut role for a month ago. There are things that are still with you just kind of like, really? Okay.
For me it's stuff in game.
Yes, 100%.
Like,
yes.
I feel like week to week, the preparation is pretty good because I thought the game plan against Oregon was pretty smart. Like you just try and keep them in front of you, try to make them drive down the field. Just Oregon's better than you.
Well, the screens in that one, I'm still not sold on that. I understand that you can't get beat, but you have a lot of yards on screens. I know Oregon's really fast, but you also know what Oregon does. But I think that's kind of what we're talking about, big picture with Aaron, right? Like you see it.
But Oregon ran that game plan because Illinois was just keeping everything in front of them, and Illinois players just couldn't make plays in space. Like going zero coverage against Oregon, you weren't going to win. Like you're just going to get beat all the time because one-on-one, you can't make it work. I thought last week what they did against Michigan State was really, really good. Purdue, the first half, great. Second half, what the hell happened? So it's kind of those in-game stuff that I still do. The corrections get made. Sometimes I feel like it's slow to be made, but I think we are coming off his best performance. And I think the improvement you're seeing as the season goes along is important to see compared to last year when it felt like they just sank at the end of the year and there were no answers.
No, last year was, hey, this offense has got to put up 45 points or you're losing this game towards the end of the season.
Save us, Johnny Newton. Felt like the game.
Yeah, I do see it with Aaron Henry. Like Aaron Henry is a really smart football guy. I know that. You don't get here because you're not. Are there things he's adjusting to in terms of being a defensive coordinator? Absolutely. I don't know that he would argue against that. I think he can captivate people easily. I think he can figure out the in-game stuff as he continues to do this more and more. And I say that, like, in-game has just been inconsistent.
Yeah.
As you mentioned. So I get it. I see what Brett Bielema saw.
Like,
I understand.
Kansas game plan was phenomenal.
Yeah.
The Nebraska overtime, really good. Finally got after it, but it took them a while to get after it, but they finally did in overtime. So there's been some really good moments.
There's been really, really good moments. The numbers speak for themselves. Obviously, when you're a fan of a team, like people listening to this are, where you cover every game like we do, yeah, there are moments where you say, like, oh, well, that was certainly an interesting choice. Right? And like that is
rushing only 3 has been his biggest problem.
I think honestly that as you kind of try to understand, that seems to be the biggest hot button topic with this defense.
But
honestly, I don't know that you can point to anything else like hate that, don't like that at all. It's rushing 3 and having Gabe Akis and Seth Coleman in coverage. If you take that out, this conversation probably feels a lot different because of the way the numbers have improved, the game plans you've seen against certain teams. That just kind of feels like the thing we're really talking about, right? As we unpack this.
I did not expect this team to only be allowing 20.6 points per game. I thought this would be a 26. Like I thought it'd be very small improvement. So I just wanted to acknowledge that there has been significant improvement.
And look, this segment, this number 3 of 6 is probably going to be what ticks people off the most listening. Yeah, because it feels like there are very, very set feelings about Aaron Henry as a defensive coordinator. I think he'll be fine. I do. Like maybe I'm a prisoner of the improvement we've seen over these 10 games, but I think he'll be okay.
The one thing I'd like them to do is just get more takeaways now, because it started off so great to begin the season, but now I'd like to see them get a few more takeaways because they only have 5 during Big Ten play, 4 during Big Ten play. It's a really low number. So I think that's the next step, and maybe that's just experience in the back 7 because Miles Scott, Xavier Scott are kind of those playmakers, but those corners so far haven't made those big plays.
Yeah, I'm with you because the pressure has ramped up. We've seen that ramp up more, and you didn't see there was obviously the goal line and rushing 3, and that sticks in the mind because they scored a touchdown on that play, and there weren't many touchdowns scored by Michigan State, but that was a good game plan. I feel like you've seen him get better, and again, not to belabor the point, the rushing 3 is what people are frustrated with. That is it, because everything else, for the most part, has made more sense, and the results have been better. I'll be wrong. Maybe he'll never figure it out and the total complete picture of it, but I think
the numbers
smart enough. Yeah, and he's a smart guy. People believe in him.
You know what other game he doesn't get enough credit for? Penn State. Like I know Penn State got a lot of yards and maybe hurt themselves by making some mistakes and not running the football once they got across the 40-yard line. But to hold Penn State to 21 points, and one of those was basically after an interception in your own territory, that was a pretty good performance where you just kind of kept your offense in that game. So I think there's clear improvement here. Number 4, Joey, what concerns you most about this matchup against the Rutgers Scarlet Knights?
Kyle Monangai, right? I still worry about Illinois' ability to stop the run. And you happen to go up against a really good running back and one of the statistically the most productive running backs in the Big Ten against a team that isn't going to Kansas this, that isn't going to Penn State this. If they're running the ball well, I'd be really hard-pressed to think they're going to get away from that. And you've been kind of bailed out by teams. Jeff Grimes inexplicably electing to throw the football at times. Penn State, Andy Kołnecki inexplicably deciding to throw the football at times. I'm not getting the vibe that Rutgers has a lot of interest in that. If Monangai's going, they're going to feed the guy. And it's a huge task for Illinois to stop him. And then you pair that with the fact that Ethan Calif-McManus has been playing better in these last 3-4 games. And all of a sudden, you can't just Michigan this. You've got to really play for their ability to make the right plays, the easy plays through the air. And that's risky business for Illinois, because Monongaia is good enough to really make it for a long day.
Yeah, one of the reasons that sub package was successful is because you got into third and longs, right? The average down and distance on third downs for Michigan State was 3rd and 8, right? So like you get into those, that defense is going to win more often than not. And that's part of why Illinois was 2 for 15 and stopping Michigan State, or Michigan State was 2 for 15 on third down. So yeah, for me, it's the rushing attack, because this is a balanced Rutgers offense now. Like Kaliak-Manis, I know he wasn't great at Minnesota. I don't know if he's a great quarterback. I think Illinois got the obvious quarterback advantage in this game, but he is playing well the last few games, and they're kind of a 50-50 team. They're a balanced offense where he can make plays off the play action. And if you get him in 3rd and short, I think they have a good chance of converting it, but get him in 3rd and long. And I think that's when you feel better about going against Kaliak-Manis. But I'm still concerned, Joey, because the rushing defense hasn't been strong all year. This is a decent Rutgers offense. Their left tackle is really, really good, but you still have linebacker questions, right? I know they played well against Michigan State, but Monongaia is better than the Michigan State running backs. And he's physical. He can wear you out. 19, 20 carries. He's going to get those. The good news is I think your DBs are really good tacklers. So I think, your safeties, your corners have done a really good job, but I think it's a really important game for those linebackers to continue to get better with their reliability, because Monongaia is one of the better running backs. I don't think he's the best running back Illinois played. Devin Neal is great. I think Nick Singleton is great. Katron Allen's really good, but this is one of the better ones you're gonna face. So that is definitely the concern for me: is can Illinois force 3rd and longs, because that's hard against Monongaia.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I thought Michigan's running backs obviously are good, but you could play that. You could kind of tie a hand behind Michigan's back in that game and really play for the run entirely. And I just don't know that you can do that at this point. You probably would have liked to see Rutgers, in fact, a month ago.
Yeah.
If you were Illinois, because they've really started to put something together here down the stretch of the season. But that's the biggest storyline to me. And I feel like we say that a lot on here, stop the run, but
it's what they are. I mean, Illinois is 15th in the Big Ten in rushing defense. They're allowing, during Big Ten play, 15th in the Big Ten in run defense. They're allowing 157.7 rushing yards per game.
Can I ask you something? Can I ask you a question that we didn't talk about that I want to?
Yeah.
It feels like the worst that we thought this team were going to have, stopping the run, in some regards, running the ball in the way that we thought, like those have kind of held true for the most part. The rushing game has been better of late than we thought. Is there something coming into the season that we thought was going to be either a massive strength, that's not even massive, strength, or something we were concerned about that hasn't played out like that? Because I feel like this team has been very much what we thought it was going to be, not the record, but just in terms of what they'd be good and not so good at.
Yeah, I thought the offensive line would be a little better. I thought the running attack would be a little bit better. I do think the passing game has been about what I expected, but Luke Altmaier has been better than I thought he would. But, Pat and Zakari, kind of what I thought they could be. The special teams have been really good. I just think the secondary has been reliable. Yeah. And I didn't know if we were going to get reliability. I thought we'd get improvement. And while the improvement isn't stark, like I just read off the pass efficiency defense, like they're 4 points better. They're 13 spots in the national rankings better. That's probably what I expected, but just the eye test has been way better with the secondary than I thought it would be. I thought there'd be some more busts. I thought there'd be that kind of thing. And they haven't given up big plays. And I think that's really been a huge part of this Illinois defense.
Yeah, secondary comes to mind as being better than I think we thought. We thought Xavier Scott was going to – what was that?
The pass rush has been better. I mean, I know it comes in bunches, but boy, this pass rush can take over games. Like Gabe is taking over games, and we've seen obviously these linebackers now get after it. And I think Seth has been really disruptive. The numbers just haven't come. So hopefully for him, for his NFL stock, that those sack numbers start to show up, because I do think he's been pretty disruptive, though a little inconsistent.
Yeah, I think the secondary comes to mind as better, because we thought Xavier Scott was going to be outside and Tyler Strain was going to be nickel. We didn't have Caleb Patterson or Torrey Cox penciled in as starters coming into this season. Offensive line has not been as good as we thought, as it was the optimism from inside the building that it was going to be. Those two really those really, really come to mind for me. And I don't say this to like, see, we told you. I'm not trying to flex that we told you. I just usually over the course of a year with any team, like there's just something that's really unexpected in terms of a strength or weakness. I feel like this team is really no new flaws have really cropped up over the last 3 or 4 games, and nothing's really like drastically improved over, like the running game has marginally gotten better over the last 5 weeks or so.
I think our expectation was Luke Altmaier would get better. And we thought he was going to be a top half kind of quarterback. I didn't know if he'd be a top 5 quarterback. I thought that would be his ceiling. He is hitting his ceiling of what I thought he could do this year. And he, again, I mentioned over and over again, he is the reason they're 7-3 for the most part. Like his play is led to so many close wins. And that's maybe what has surprised me is in these close games, Illinois more often than not, like higher than 50% is winning. I thought it'd be closer to a 50-50 split of, they lose 4 close games, they win 4 close games, but it's been they're winning those.
Yeah, two things before we move on. Like you could have told me this version of Luke Altmaier is what the 2025 version of Luke Altmaier is going to be. I'm like, oh, sure, 3rd year in the system, playing at this level. Now you're kind of looking at 2025 like, oh, whoa, where can this go with Luke Altmaier? And the second point,
receivers. Need some receivers to step up because those guys are a big part of it too.
That's 100% right. And then the other part, when you said the secondary numbers aren't that different, they're better, but they're not like hugely better. When a team that plays in the margins like Illinois does, those minimal differences, those change things, right? Like this is a team that was right there.
Maybe the biggest one, and this isn't a surprise for a Brett Bielema team, but they're number 8 in the country in penalty yards, like fewest penalty yards. That's a huge stat. And we talk about winning in the margins, special teams, penalties have been part of that. Their turnover margin is a positive this year after it was a negative. Those are kind of the things that have changed to make this a winning team, because like last year's team against this year's team, it's a toss-up probably, right? But like this team has just played a little bit cleaner and just made some bigger plays when it matters. All right, number 5, Joey, what makes you most optimistic about this matchup against Rutgers?
I feel like a broken record, Jeremy. I'm sorry to do this.
Quarterback!
Yeah. Yeah, man. It is because you've got the quarterback advantage. I don't know that you've not had that quarterback advantage since Oregon, but you've unquestionably got the quarterback advantage. Rutgers is 5th worst in the Big Ten in opponent passing yards per game. Feels like a place for Illinois to try to exploit this Rutgers defense. I know that their sacks, like Illinois, these are for two, like at East Coast and the Midwest, these are 2 pretty similar teams. One team has a better quarterback. Rutgers sacks, if you look in the Big Ten, have come in bunches. I mean, it's been like 4 against Nebraska, 4 against, I think, UCLA. I think they had 5 against Minnesota. But I also feel like they're not the quick twitch like Penn State gave Illinois fit. So what I'm saying is Luke Altmaier should have more time back there to let your Pat Bryants, your Zachary Franklins, your Colin Dixons, Hank Beatty's get out there and let those guys get some work done. So it is. You got a good quarterback, and you've got a team that leaves some room to exploit in the secondary.
Yeah, I think the passing game is where Illinois has the advantage on both sides because 1, Luke Altmaier, and 2, Gabe Backus. Your pass rush is better than their pass rush. So Rutgers should have the running advantage with Kyle Monungai and what their offense can do. And I do think Cadillac Madness is playing better ball. I do truly think this is a toss-up team, but when it's 3rd down, I feel better about Illinois on both sides of the ball just because of they have a special quarterback, they have a special pass rusher right now, and they're playing well in those regards. But they got to play sound, and they can't penalize them themselves. They can't turn it over because you know what Rutgers doesn't do? They don't turn it over, and they don't get penalties. This is very much like Schiano and Bielema, very similar stories, right? Like Schiano in his 30s, great success at a high major conference. Bielema the same thing. They move on to bigger jobs. Bielema to the SEC, Schiano to the NFL. They both have failure there. They come back to their home states. They get rehabilitated in the NFL for a little bit under some good coaches. Schiano's Urban Meyer with Ohio State, and then with obviously Belichick in New England, and now they come back to their home states, and they're kind of leading these teams to get up the Big Ten ladder. And that's why I find this game so interesting is there's a lot of similarities to both these programs and what they're trying to do in the Big Ten. And, you look at it right now, they're both top half Big Ten teams. So this is a meaningful game for both of them. But yeah, Luke Altmaier is always kind of the competitive advantage and the reason to give you optimism, right?
Yeah, for sure. And also just really quickly, like recruiting, I feel like every recruiting cycle has a different, you're really recruiting heavily against this. You've seen Wisconsin and Illinois and Brett Bielema's tenure go toe-to-toe. You've seen Kirk Ferentz in Iowa and Brett Bielema's tenure go toe-to-toe. Michigan has been involved in that. Sneakily, Rutgers has just kind of been around. I think that paints a picture of Brett Bielema, Greg Schiano go for the same types of guys. And, it's easier to say that when you're not talking the 5 stars. It's a type of guy for pretty much every program ever. But when you're talking about these, ranked 700 to 1,000 or 500 to 800, Brett Bielema, Craig Schiano have a lot of overlap on the dudes that they're going after. Of course, Illinois has made New Jersey a priority outside of the state, along with Florida, and Rutgers similarly has come into Illinois and tried to find some room there. But those aren't the only reasons. There's a lot of overlap with those two.
All right, let's get into our bold prediction for Illinois right now. I game this out, Joey. So I'll throw this at you. Assuming 4 teams are in the playoff from the Big Ten, and I would imagine there are. Like, I know we can have this Indiana conversation. If they are even competitive against Ohio State and lose, and then they kick the crap out of Purdue, which they will, they're 11-1, right? You don't fall from 5 out of the college football playoff with a loss to Ohio State. So they're in. Penn State, barring 2 losses, is in. We know Ohio State and Oregon are in this thing. So that leaves just a couple teams that have a chance at 8 wins in the Big Ten. Illinois, obviously one of them. But if they beat Rutgers, that keeps Rutgers from getting to 8 wins. And the only 2 other teams who can still get to 8 wins in the Big Ten are Minnesota, who still has Penn State this weekend, and at Wisconsin. I don't see them winning both those games, right, to get to 8 wins. And then Iowa is the other one. And I know they got their 3rd-string quarterback playing, but I feel good about them the last 2 games. But they played in the Citrus Bowl last year. So even if they get to 8 wins, I think Illinois is going to be the favored one because they just usually don't go to the same bowl game 2 years in a row. So I feel like if Illinois wins this game and knocks Rutgers out of contention, and as long as Minnesota doesn't win 2 more games, I feel like I might book tickets to Orlando and be ready to go to the Citrus Bowl, regardless of what happens against Northwestern.
Yeah, I get that. I'm with you on that. And even if Iowa, with the 3rd-string quarterback, is able to get to 8 wins, feels like the perfect trade. Wasn't Iowa in the ReliaQuest Bowl last year, though?
Let's go check.
I'm almost sure that's right, because I was jealous of our 24/7 friends who had the sweetest bartender in the media hospitality room to take care of the Iowa.
They were in the Citrus Bowl last year.
When were they in the ReliaQuest?
They weren't.
They weren't? Are you sure?
No, they've been in the ReliaQuest Bowl. Yeah, I mean, what?
They would have been in the. Were they in Nashville before?
Yeah,
Citrus. That's right.
Before that, so I think they're.
So it would make sense. Go to the ReliaQuest where Illinois was in 2022. Illinois would go to the Citrus Bowl. Everything you said, 100% in agreement with. Wisconsin. Someone was at the ReliaQuest Bowl. It must have been Wisconsin. At any rate,
we love the ReliaQuest Bowl, by the way.
We do, and I was jealous of someone. Please tell me it was Wisconsin, so I don't sound like such a more of a fool.
It was Wisconsin. They had a good game against LSU. Remember?
There we go.
Nick Bosa was there. Yeah,
right on board. Every path that you say makes all the sense in the world. Pending Indiana. Indiana is a bowling ball falling from like 10 stories onto hardwood with this. Like, if they fall out of the college football playoff.
Why would they?
I'm not, look, that's beyond, I don't think they should. I'm not trying to tell you that I think they should. Right. But that is a topic of conversation right now as you try to lay out this playoff.
If they lost like 45-10, then maybe. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't know if Ohio State's going to score that much. But yeah, I still 11-1. They'll beat the crap out of Purdue. And people feel better about them. I just think it's hard to keep an 11-1 Big Ten team out, despite what I think are fair criticisms about their schedule. Not that Indiana picked it, right? Like they just got lucky with an easier Big Ten schedule, but still winning 11 games, I still think means something. So,
yeah, I don't think they should. But if that happens, then you got a little bit more, confusion. Do you go back to the ReliaQuest Bowl for the second time in 3 years? Do you go to Nashville? Do you do the Mayo Parade or whatever in Charlotte? I don't know. I don't think you're going to have to get to that scenario, but that is really, in my brain, as long as Illinois wins on Saturday, the only thing that could, I would think, change things up from what's likely to be a Citrus Bowl appearance.
That's why I kind of look at this game as kind of the plan for the Citrus Bowl. And then Northwestern, you just want to win because you want to get to 9 wins and you want to beat Northwestern. But if you lose this one and then Rutgers wins their last game and you beat Northwestern, I think Rutgers could potentially go over you, even though, Illinois' fan base might travel a little bit more, some of those things. But yeah, the Big Ten's crazy right now, Joey, because you got the 4 teams in the top 5 of the college football playoff, and you have 12 Big Ten teams between 4 and 6 wins right now overall. And Illinois has 7. They're one of 5 Big Ten teams with 7 wins. It's insane.
Yeah, it's not what we thought. We thought this was going to be the push to A Bowl, maybe a Detroit Christmas for Jeremy Werner and I, listening to Marshall Mathers LP on our drive to and from Detroit.
We should go too.
But I will say, I will. Oh, what's?
Are you Marshall Mathers LP guide? Eminem show?
No, Eminem show really was.
It's pretty good.
Was pretty high up there for me. I don't know that this was not on the 6-question list.
I would probably go Marshall Mathers LP, but The Way I Am, underrated. I know it's on the same album as Stan and some of those other big songs, but man, that song hits hard.
I will say, like 2 beers, like Superman. I feel like I heard that song 100 times when I was in like 8th grade. I don't know if I should have heard it 100 times in 8th grade, but I unquestionably did. The last thing, real quickly, before we move on to our picks to click, if Illinois and Rutgers are both at 8, which is very possible, right? That becomes interesting because I would sit here and tell you I think Illinois is much more attractive to the Citrus Bowl in terms of your fan turnout, your travel. They've basically been renting a house or bowl reps in Champaign. I feel like I've seen them at Memorial Stadium like 5 times this season. It's easily been 3 in all seriousness. That gets really interesting to me is if they still say, hey, we like how Illinois would travel. We'd like them to come to Orlando.
And Bielema, I think, helps, to be honest with you. I just think he knows people. People like him. He's really charming with all that stuff.
So. Brett Bielema told me that he knew like the 3rd cousin of the Citrus Bowl rep from like way back and sometime somewhere. Like, yeah, you know what, man? That checks. Brett Bielema seems to know everybody everywhere.
All right, let's wrap this up, Joe, with our picks to click. We did well last week, by the way. I picked Zachary Franklin. He had a good game, 44 yards and that touchdown catch, 7 catches. But you win. Pat Bryant, 4 catches, 135 yards, and a touchdown. Congratulations on that one. But I do win on the defense. Gabe Akis worked out pretty well. And Matthew Bailey had a really good game. So we didn't get it wrong here. It's just one of us was more right than the other. So I'll let you lead off. Offense, who's your pick to click, John?
Okay, well, I don't want to just go back to the Pat Bryant. Well, I do.
Oh, you go for it if you want.
I certainly do want to go back to the Pat Bryant well, but okay. Here's why I'll justify going back to that well.
Because he's the best player.
I mean, he is kind of approaching Isaiah Williams territory in terms of like, hey, we probably shouldn't pick him anymore. And in fact, I won't, but I will say I wanted to just because if he's within 1 touchdown for Northwestern next week of that 10, he is my pick to click. You can write that down. We can skip that segment on Thanksgiving.
I'll let you ride with Pat the last 3 games, Joe.
No, I'll take Luke Altmaier. Very bold change. It's really going out on a limb with Luke Altmaier. I'm just going to cover all the bases with him, and you can put the barometer to click as high as you want. But we just spent half the pod talking about how the passing attack is Illinois' advantage in this game. Why in the world would I not pick the guy who engineers that?
All right. You would go with Luke Altmaier.
Well, take him off the table if you don't want me to pick him.
No, you go with it. You go.
Make rules for this.
All right, I am all aboard the Josh McCray train. I just want to get him 15-plus touches. He needs to get 15-plus touches to get to where I want him to be here, and I think he's deserving of that. I still think Aiden Laughley is going to have opportunities in this game. I thought about getting bold and going there, Joey, but since you went Altmaier, I went with which if you went McCray, I was going to actually go Laughley. But here are opposing Power 4 running backs against Rutgers. Virginia Tech, Bajal Tootin, 15 carries, 122 yards, 3 touchdowns. Kyron Jones had 9 carries, 60 yards. Washington, Jonah Coleman, 16 carries for 148 yards. Wisconsin, Tawee Walker, 198 yards, 3 touchdowns. Yakimelli, 4 carries, 72 yards. UCLA, Keegan Jones, 5 receptions for 114 yards. USC, Woody Marks, 20 touches, 142 yards, 2 touchdowns. Minnesota, surprisingly, of all the teams, they held Darius Taylor to 12 touches for 25 yards. That's a great job. It's also an outlier because the next week, Roman Emby, 21 touches, 146 yards, and 1 touchdown. They are not good defending running backs. Like their linebackers have been banged up. Their edge players have been banged up. And their secondary times can struggle to tackle. So I think Josh McCray can, if you give him 20 touches, I think he can go over 100 yards and obviously get you a couple touchdowns. So I just like that matchup against Rutgers. When you look at the history of the running backs this season going against them, I think this is the game where you might want to just feed a guy who can be a bell cow. I think Lawfrey deserves touches too. I just don't know if this is the Khalil Valentine game. I give some of those touches back to Josh McCray.
What a really cool few weeks for Josh McCray. We've talked about it a lot, so we don't need to rehash it all in its entirety.
354 yards from scrimmage, 7 touchdowns during the last 5 games.
Pretty good. And when Illinois needed him, it's not like he's complimenting Caden Fagan. Brett Bielema mentioned it today. If you go back to that Eastern Illinois game, it was Aiden Lawfrey, Caden Fagan, Josh McCray, probably in that order. And now Josh McCray is their featured back. I talked to him about his relationship with Brett Bielema, asked Brett Bielema about it today, but the guy never gave up on Josh. We kind of poked a little bit of fun at it on this podcast. We kind of rolled our eyes like, okay, he's still living with this and looks pretty good now. Because Josh McCray is rolling back the clock a little bit to that 21 year and getting going. I still think the run that I really saw with him the most against Michigan State was bouncing that first touchdown outside, showing that burst. When that's like, I know he sometimes will roll his shoulders. His tell for me is when that stiff arm is really, really working. It's a long day for someone else because he's got a really good stiff arm. He's incredibly strong, and him putting that out there and just kind of stopping everybody. Yeah, he's been really impressive, man.
All right, let's go a defensive pick to click. I struggled a little bit with this one. I'm between 2 guys because I think it's really, really important for these 2 guys to, play well and stop Kyle Monungai. I'm going to go with James Kreutz. I feel like he's due a big play. I feel like he's due a big play where that's a forced fumble. Listen, I don't think he's going to play like 80% of the snaps, but I think Rutgers is going to try and run it down Illinois' throat, and James Kreutz is a really important part of that. So I'm going to go with Kreutz. Can he get a big play to kind of change this game? A guy who's played a lot of snaps the last 2 games, Joey. It's time.
Yeah, I thought he played a lot better than I would have thought against Michigan State. He played more controlled, not as Kreutzy as we've seen him, just kind of 1,000 miles an hour and sometimes getting lost in that shuffle. He was probably my number 1 pick, so you can have that. Oh, boy. I'm going to go with Xavier Scott. I think that if you force the Kyle McManus to pass the ball, Xavier Scott feels due for a play to really change something. He's a guy who, frankly, is getting a ton of attention. The Thorpe Award was in Champaign last week to see him. He's clearly, like, you can see it eye test wise, like he's very consistent. That position gives up catches on target. It's a tough position to hold someone like, you'll see it, boundary corners will have like 2 catches on 6 targets. It's a lot more difficult to have that discrepancy in the slot.
It's simple geometry, right? It's just it's closer to the quarterback, so it's easier to complete that.
100%. But for as consistent as he's been, and I think he's really elevated his draft stock, and you're hoping if you're Illinois, the appeal of playing with his younger brother next year and further raising that stock would put a pause on him wanting to make that leap. But it's time, like, make a game-changing play. Go flip something on its head if you're Xavier Scott and lead this team to a big road win. I don't know. Given that position, how many opportunities are there going to be? But go find one. He feels like a guy who's due.
All right, let's go bold predictions. Did pretty well with this. We didn't hit them, but the idea of them was pretty good. Kaneda Odeluga, you said 2 tackles for loss. He basically had that. Luke Altmaier, I said 250-plus passing yards, 3 touchdowns. Could have had that, was right on the grasp of that. So I thought we did pretty well there, Joey. But let's get bold prediction. What do you got?
How bold is too bold?
The bolder, the better, Joey.
Oh, perfect. That's wonderful. I don't want to do that because Rutgers is really good on special teams.
Is this your Canary Wilcher day?
Well, yeah, my Canary Wilcher punt returner with Hank Beatty. Like Hank Beatty would have been my new pick. Rutgers is too sound on special teams. They really are. Like that is something they do well. I will take 2 touchdowns for Tanner Arkin.
Whew.
One feels like that's not really bold. That's just
it's been a while since we had a tight end touchdown though.
Been a little bit. One feels I feel really good about. One I do not feel very good about. 2, but just put it out there. Let's see what he can do.
You know, these haven't been bold enough, probably.
That's what I'm saying.
Especially what did we start with? You were the Jordan Anderson touchdown.
Yeah, and you were Pat Bryant quarterback. We've really gotten we have really watered down the bold prediction in recent week. Let it rip, Werner.
See, I felt like this was bold, but it doesn't feel bold enough now. I was going to say Illinois gets 2 takeaways. That feels really bold. Not bold enough, though.
More bold. Unless you want to make one of those a touchdown. Bold predictions, you got to throw it out there.
Yes, let's do it. 2 takeaways, 1 for a touchdown.
Ooh, yes.
Boom. It's time, right? It's time. Xavier Scott the only touchdown this year, right?
Yes.
Miles? Did Miles Scott have pick 6? I think Miles had pick 6. It's been a while.
A little bit like non-conference. Part of can I put you on the spot? Is it fumble or is it pick? You don't have to. You'll be right either way if it hits. But what's your gut telling you?
I do think they force a fumble. That's kind of why I picked James Krutz. I just think he's due for one of his jarring hits to be one of those. Man, it'd be fun if like Ryan Mead had a fumble recovery for a touchdown. But I do think they get a pick on Caliac Manis, and maybe they return it for a touchdown.
Xavier Scott.
And Xavier Scott would fit along.
Scott. That would suck to have your bold prediction hit, but my pick to click. I'm too tough to live with.
Xavier Scott, the only defensive touchdown. Miles Scott does not have one. Matthew Bailey tried to get that one, but he knew it was wasn't a fumble. So there you go.
All right, I like it. That was the boldness that we needed. We got a little too. I guess in reality, what was your pick? Was your bold like Luke was going to go nuclear?
253 touchdowns. Yeah.
I mean, those are big numbers. Kaneno DeLuca hadn't really played a lot to that point.
Just a bold, like let's go big.
Yeah, let's really. We only got 2 regular season game left. Next week, start hashing them out. Let's really spice it up.
Yeah. All right. That'll do it for us. We appreciate you listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube as well. Hit that like button, subscribe to us, and hit the notifications bell. Joey Wagner and I heading out to Piscataway on Friday. We'll see you guys out there this weekend if you're out there. But everybody have a great weekend. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer podcast.